Chapter 1. Dialectical Materialism. Marxist philosophy is otherwise known as dialectical materialism. It assumes that reality is material, constituted by particles, and that consciousness arises and proceeds from matter, and accounts for development or change in terms of the laws inherent to matter, as well as the interaction of matter and consciousness, peculiar to man. It may sound redundant and trite to speak of reality as material or as consisting of matter. But we must recall that for long periods in the history of philosophy, the Platonic and Augustinian kind of objective idealism held sway and dictated that reality is ideal or consists of ideas, and that the material, sensible things are but a reflection and poor copy of that reality. Even in the present scientific milieu, there is the view posed by subjective idealism, especially along the line of the empiricist Hume, that reality is but a mental construct of the sense data of the individual human perceiver. There is the denial of the material object of the physical sciences, which object is put at par with the mere belief in the supernatural. A. Materialism. To understand dialectical materialism, let us first clarify its root word materialism. The best way to do so is to clarify the meaning and relationship of matter and consciousness in a general manner. At the outset, however, let us make short shrift of the kind of materialism that preachers, reactionary politicians, landlords, and the leading lights of the bourgeoisie often inveigh against, but in fact always indulge in. This is supposed to be greed, money-grubbing, gluttony, and all kinds of selfish vices of which they themselves are guilty. To Marxists, materialism is the outlook and methodology that correctly understands the nature and composition of the universe and the relationship of matter and human consciousness. Matter is a general term that embraces things constituted by particles, existing in certain modes and measurable in space and time. It is the physical object of human perception and cognition. Consciousness ranges from sensations to thoughts or ideas. Matter is the source and basis of consciousness. Consciousness is the product and reflection of matter. It is in this sense that we begin to speak of matter as being primary, while consciousness is secondary. Thought itself is an electrochemical phenomenon emanating from specially arranged matter called the human brain. But, while thought is secondary to matter, it is the highest product of matter. Insofar as it is correctly reflective of the laws of motion in matter, it is capable of interacting with and transforming things faster than nature can on its own, without human intervention. Unlike mechanical materialism, which reduces things and processes to the laws of mechanics, Marxist materialism stresses the comprehensive capability of man in transforming nature and society. It guides and integrates the advances made by natural and social sciences. Whether we refer to common-day experience or to geological history, matter precedes consciousness in time. Before we can venture to think or speak of anything, we assume the existence of the thing that is the object of our interest. Natural science shows that Homo sapiens, or cognitive man, is only some 50,000 to 60,000 years old. The Earth was bereft of human consciousness, and yet this planet existed. One can only be astounded by the enormous amount of time involved in the sequence of inorganic matter, organic matter, and the differentiation of flora and fauna, down to the differentiation of the hominid, man-like ape, and Homo sapiens. We can therefore easily assert that matter can exist independently of consciousness, while the latter cannot exist independently of the former. When Marxists refer to objective reality, they speak of things as existing independently of whatever one may think. It is common notion that matter is finite, while consciousness is infinite. It results from a failure to distinguish correct from incorrect ideas. Correct ideas are a reflective approximation of objective reality. They cannot go beyond the material facts. They tend to trail behind the material events or phenomena. 2. Even fantasies are a mere distortion of reality or jumbling of parts of reality. The idea of an infinite, self-subsistent, supernatural being has been invented in the same manner as Walt Disney's Mickey Mouse. If one studies the history of the various religions, one cannot fail to see the concept of the supernatural as a mythological creation of human imagination. the four major religions existing to this day maintain values that belong to the slave society. These were perpetuated as the suffocating ideology of feudal societies. While Marxism philosophically opposes religion, it politically tolerates it in the recognition that superior scientific ideas will prevail in the long run through persuasion, social practice, and the benefits of science and technology. Marxism carries over from liberal democracy the principle of upholding the freedom of thought and belief. B. Materialist dialectics. Pre-Hegelian dialectics simply means argumentation in the abstract, or abstract argument counter abstract argument. This is exemplified by the Socratic dialogues as written by Plato and by the similarly metaphysical coordination and disputation of fixed ideas, dogmas, in theological circles. Materialist dialectics is the signal achievement of Marxism. Marx and Engels drew the most advanced and correct ideas from the best of idealist philosophy and materialist philosophy of their time, especially in Germany where philosophic activity was at its peak. They set Hegelian dialectics aright and put it on a materialist basis, as partly indicated by Feuerbach. The result is an original and epoch-making advance in philosophy. Hegelian dialectics asserts that development is first of all the self-development of thought before it is realized in history or in the material world. What makes Hegel the most outstanding idealist philosopher is that he dynamized the arid, static, and lifeless dialectics of all previous idealism and took into account the development of the material world. Feuerbach correctly pointed out that ideas are merely the sensuous reflection of the material world in human perception. He fell short of the Marxist comprehension of the endless interaction between cognition and reality and the capability of man for critical revolutionary activity. While it may be said that Marx and Engels put Hegelian dialectics on a materialist basis, they did not simply adopt his formula of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, which ends up in synthesis as final perfection. But rather they asserted that change is an endless process because anything at any stage always consists of contradictory aspects. The most fundamental meaning of Marxist materialist dialectics is that things by their very essence are in the process of constant change. So Marxists say, nothing is permanent except change. But this does not mean that the things of nature change only by themselves, without human direction and participation. It is precisely because of man's increasing scientific understanding of and mastery over nature and his society that the processes of change can be directed and hastened. Materialist dialectics, or the law of contradiction, is the law of motion inherent in matter, springs from the differences and interaction of things, and operates in a two-way interaction of matter and consciousness. The materialism of Feuerbach one-sidedly took into account only the one-way reflection by human perception of material reality. In the philosophical writings of Marx and Engels, three laws of dialectics can be drawn. These are 1. The law of the negation of the negation. 2. The law of the interpenetration or unity of opposites. And 3. The law of quantitative to qualitative change. The first law means that things run into their opposite in the full course of development. For instance, capitalism started as free competition, in contradiction with mercantilism, but has eventually become monopoly capitalism. The second law means that in everything there are two opposite aspects. One is the principal aspect that determines the basic character of the whole thing. The other is the secondary aspect which is needed by the principal one, but which continuously struggles to assume the principal position. For instance, the capitalist class and the proletariat are in the same thing, the capitalist system. They need each other, and at the same time struggle against each other in the course of development. Insofar as everything, including capitalism, comes to pass, the struggle of the two classes is permanent and absolute, while their unity within the same system is temporary and relative. The third law means that change may at first be conspicuously quantitative or incremental, but a point is reached at which the rise in quantity results in what is called a qualitative leap. In other words, evolution precedes revolution. Reforms precede revolution. The three laws of dialectics are interrelated and integral, and may be summed up into the law of contradiction or the law of the unity of opposites. The law of contradiction is universal. It embraces all things and processes at every stage and phase of development. It is also particular in that there are specific laws of motion peculiar to different things, knowledge of which laws leads us to the appropriate methods of handling them. Everything has its principal and secondary aspects. In complex things and processes, there is one principal aspect, but among other several aspects, there is always one next in importance, which may be identified as the secondary aspect. For instance, in capitalist society, the capitalist class is the principal aspect, and is most directly contradicted by the working class as the secondary aspect, even as there are intermediate classes and strata, making the whole situation complex. Several kinds of contradictions may be at work in the same thing or process. To determine the basic operation of the thing or process is to determine the principal contradiction and secondary contradiction. Thus, contradiction can be solved one after the other, and the solution of the principal contradiction or problem leads to the solution of the next. Contradictory aspects constitute an identity in the sense that they are bound either in cooperation or in struggle under given circumstances, and also that if the secondary aspect replaces the principal one from the ruling position, strength merely passes from the former to the latter. See theory of knowledge. Social practice is the basis and source of knowledge. The latter is the reflection and approximation of social practice. However, knowledge gained from social practice leads to a higher level of practice, which in turn leads to a higher level of knowledge. The spiraling process is endless. Mao depicts this as advancing in waves. Social practice embraces three things: 1. Production, 2. Class struggle, and 3. Scientific experiment. All these involve the collective experience of large numbers of people. Production, the struggle to transform nature, began with the advent of man and has differentiated him from all other animal species. In all times past and in all times to come, man is ever involved in the struggle to understand and master nature for productive purposes and for widening his freedom. The general level of production determines the general level of knowledge and the kind of society possible. Class struggle arose with the advent of exploiting and exploited classes. Classless society, preoccupied mainly with the mysteries of nature, lasted for several tens of thousands of years. Class society is some 5,500 years if we base ourselves on the findings of archaeology, anthropology, and history. This kind of society is characterized by the appropriation of the economic surplus, over and above subsistence of the mass of real producers, by a small section of the population. Consequently, it is characterized by the resistance of the deprived and exploited mass of real producers. One kind of exploiting class society after another arose and passed away. The slave system led to the feudal system. Each reigned for thousands of years. Capitalism arose from feudal society some hundreds of years ago. Presently, it is trying to perpetuate itself in the developed countries and spread to the underdeveloped countries, where there are still significant vestiges of feudalism. Capitalism cannot last for as long a period as the previous social formations, because it has created the very conditions and means for its relatively rapid supplantation by a non-exploitative class society, socialism. Science and technology for mass production have been greatly developed by capitalism. It is obvious that the masses, through the modern means of large-scale production, are capable of satisfying their needs and raising their cultural level. And yet so small a class, the capitalist class, maintains an exploitative social system that allows it to privately appropriate and accumulate the social wealth rapidly. Class struggle is far more accelerated now than at any stage in the history of civilization, especially because for the first time, an exploited class struggles not only for its own emancipation, but also for that of other exploited classes and strata. Out of the intensified many-sided struggle between socialist and capitalist countries, among capitalist countries themselves, between the imperialist and developing countries, and the class struggle within every country, knowledge and material progress are making rapid strides. Scientific experiment had its rudimentary beginnings in slave society, but was suppressed due to the hegemony of religious dogmas, especially in medieval times. Following the rise of humanist, as against divinist, ideas in the Renaissance, Scientific experiment flourished in the 16th and 17th centuries. Since then, the progress of science has accelerated astoundingly. According to Mao, the process of knowing basically involves two stages: one, the perceptual or empirical, and two, the cognitive or rational. Perceptual knowledge is one derived from the gathering of raw data or facts through sense perception and social investigation. Out of these, some ideas can be formed to be brought back to and improve practice. Consequently, knowledge of a higher level can be drawn from this improved practice. Decisions, judgments, and stable conclusions would arise. These are called rational knowledge. This process is a continuous and spiraling one. While social practice is the basis and source of knowledge, it is also the testing ground and method for verifying the validity, invalidity, or inadequacy of that knowledge. Practice guided and enriched by correct theory leads to the further development of theory. Truth can be derived only from the facts. But without letting the ideas rise to a higher level through social practice, these ideas remain narrow, one-sided, and fragmented. One runs into the error of empiricism. On the other hand, correct knowledge or proven theory can become rigid, lifeless, and false when it stops to develop in accordance with changing conditions, or when new conditions and new facts are simply construed to fit old ideas in the manner of cutting the feet to fit into an old shoe. This is the error of dogmatism. Truth is both absolute and relative. It is absolute only in the sense that certain ideas are basically and stably correct in applying on a certain set of conditions. But because conditions keep on changing, truth or correct ideas are also relative. There is no final, cut-and-dried formula for social transformation. Also in the physical sciences, Newtonian physics has had to advance to Einsteinian physics. The former retains a certain limited validity, but the latter has become the comprehensive explanation so far for physical phenomena. Marxism, as founded by Marx and Engels, would have become a lifeless dogma were it not for its further development by Lenin, Stalin, Mao, and other subsequent thinkers and leaders in accordance with changing conditions. Marxism holds that the struggle for freedom is an endless one. Freedom is but the recognition of necessity and the ability to transform reality. Every development gives rise to new necessities and problems that man needs to master and solve if freedom is to be advanced. Even basically, correct solutions lead to new problems at a new and higher level of development. There is no such thing as a society of final perfection. Such a utopia is an impossibility. Even after the final defeat of exploiting classes and those who wish to restore exploitation, even after a society of economic superabundance has been achieved, the infinitude of matter and complexity of relations continuously provide man with the problems to solve. There will always be a struggle between correct and incorrect ideas. A society of perfect harmony would mean the end of humanity. Man would die of boredom and stagnation. Anti-communists do not actually speak of Marxism when they say that communists, in wanting to eliminate poverty and social inequalities, are advocating an impossible utopia where man would cease to be challenged and to take initiative to widen his one freedom. As envisioned by Marxists, socialism is a whole historical epoch that results in the elimination of private ownership of the means of production and the withering of the state as a violent, coercive instrument of class rule. But even as communism will be rid of class exploitation and oppression, there will be public authorities, and there will be friendly competitions between individuals and groups, not in terms of profit-making or the rat race of the salariat, but in terms of serving the entire people and achievements in science, arts, literature, technology, etc. Man, as we know now in overwhelming numbers, will be lifted from being preoccupied simply with earning his daily subsistence and will have abundant opportunities for social service and dignified self-fulfillment.